I I can't be her. Why is the face in the mirror, girls? The words caught in my throat, a dry, rasping sound that didn't feel like my own. My voice, usually a quiet baritone, was lost somewhere behind the panic clawing its way up my esophagus. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the tight satin cage that held me. I stared, wide-eyed, at the reflection. It wasn't me. It couldn't be. The person looking back had my eyes. Yes, the same shade of dark hazel, but they were different now, larger, framed by a delicate sweep of black eyeliner and long, impossibly thick lashes that cast tiny shadows on the high cheekbones below. My jaw, usually a sharp, angular line I was quietly proud of, had been softened with clever makeup, contoured into a gentle feminine oval. My lips, which I never paid much attention to, were now a shade of soft rose, plump and glistening under the harsh vanity lights, a cascade of dark brown hair, impossibly glossy and full of waves, tumbled over shoulders that I knew were mine but felt completely alien. My hand, trembling, came up to touch my face. The reflected hand was slender, the nails clean and bare, but it moved in perfect sync with mine. I felt the smooth, powdered skin of my cheek. It was real. This wasn't a dream. This was a funhouse mirror that had somehow swallowed me whole and spat out this creature, this girl. My gaze dropped lower, tracing the new, unbelievable silhouette. A form-fitting black dress hugged a body that was both mine and not. Two soft, rounded curves pressed against the fabric where my flat chest should have been. My waist was cinched impossibly tight, creating a dramatic curve into hips that seemed fuller, rounder. Below that, the dress clung to my legs, sheathed in a sheer, dark material that shimmered with every tiny, terrified tremor that ran through me. This girl in the mirror, they called her Ava, but my name is Evan. Evan Miller. I'm a 22-year-old design student. I'm a man. So why was I standing here, in a dressing room that smelled of hairspray and perfume, looking like this? The answer, like most of the chaos in my life, had a name, Lena. The ambush. It had all started just a few hours ago, on a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon. I was hunched over my laptop, wrestling with a brutal deadline for a branding project, when my phone buzzed with a ferocity that could only mean one thing. Lena's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by a string of a dozen exclamation points. I sighed, running a hand through my short, perpetually messy hair. Answering a call from Lena was like agreeing to jump out of a plane. You knew it would be a wild ride. You just weren't sure if the parachute would open. Evan, thank God you answered. Her voice was a whirlwind of energy. Even through the tiny speaker, I'm in a crisis, a major, Fashion Week level crisis. I need you. Lena, I'm swamped. I started, already knowing it was a losing battle. This logo design is going to be the death of me. Nonsense art can wait, but this is an emergency of the aesthetic variety, she declared dramatically. Remember that collection I was telling you about? The one for the art club showcase? I need you to come help me shoot some promo pictures. You've got a good eye. That was her hook. Lena knew my weakness was a well-placed compliment about my design sense. I was a final-year student, and my entire future felt like it was balanced on a portfolio of half-finished projects and a mountain of self-doubt. The idea of contributing, even in a small way, to something creative and tangible was a siren's call. Just taking pictures, I asked, my suspicion already tingling. You have a whole club full of photographers. Yes, but they're all divas, she scoffed. I need a friend, someone to give me honest feedback, just for an hour or two. Please. Evan, I'll buy you pizza for a week. The pizza was tempting, but the plea was what got me. Lena had been my friend since our freshman year, a chaotic, brilliant force of nature who had dragged me out of my shell on more than one occasion. I owed her. Fine, I grumbled, closing my laptop. 1 hour. Then I'm back to my typography nightmare. Where are you? Art Club Studio. See you in 10. She hung up before I could add any more conditions. The studio was in the basement of the Fine Arts building, a sprawling, high-ceilinged room that always smelled faintly of turpentine and clay. When I arrived, it was a hive of activity. Racks of clothes stood like strange, colorful trees. Lights on tall stands were being adjusted. 2 other girls I vaguely recognized from the club were sorting through accessories on a large table. And in the center of it all was Lena, directing traffic like a seasoned general. She was a work of art herself, with a sharp, asymmetrical haircut, an array of silver earrings, and a vintage band t-shirt paired with a flowing skirt. She saw me and her face lit up. "Evan, you're a lifesaver." She rushed over and pulled me into a hug that smelled of fabric softener and ambition. She steered me towards the back of the studio, past the makeshift stage. "Okay, so here's the thing." I felt a familiar sense of dread. "Lena, what's the thing?" "The thing is," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "our model for the centerpiece dress just bailed. Flew. Can you believe the nerve?" "That's tough," I said sympathetically. "So you need me to help you find a replacement?" Lena stopped and turned to face me, a slow, predatory grin spreading across her face. It was the kind of grin that preceded a truly terrible idea. "Not exactly. I don't need you to find a replacement. I need you to be the replacement." I laughed. A short, nervous bark of a laugh. Very funny. "Lena, seriously, what do you need?" Her grin didn't waver. Her eyes scanned me up and down, a weirdly analytical look in them. "I'm not joking. Look, you're tall, you're slim, you have great bone structure. Your features are surprisingly delicate. With a little work, you'd be perfect." The air left my lungs. "Lena, no, absolutely not. I'm a guy." "A guy with great legs who will fit the sample size," she countered, completely unfazed. "Evan, please, it's a closed rehearsal, just us. We just need to see how the dress looks under the lights, how it moves. No one else will ever know. It's just for our internal test shots." She was using her half-joking, half-serious tone, the one that made it impossible to get truly angry with her. She made it sound so reasonable, so harmless, but every alarm bell in my head was screaming. "No way," I said, shaking my head and taking a step back. "I can't. I wouldn't even know how to stand or walk." "We'll teach you, it's easy," one of the other girls, a cheerful redhead named Chloe, chimed in. "Come on, Evan. Don't be a prude. It's just fabric. It's performance art," Lena wheedled, grabbing my arm and gently pulling me toward a partitioned-off corner of the room. The dressing room? My feet felt like lead. My mind was racing, trying to find an excuse, an escape route. But Lena's grip was surprisingly strong, and her plea was relentless. It was for the art. It was a favor for a friend. It was just for an hour. Before I knew it, I was standing inside the curtained-off area, surrounded by the rustling ghosts of dresses, corsets, and things I didn't even have names for. The air was thick with the scent of femininity, a world away from my own life of jeans and hoodies. My protest died in my throat, replaced by a paralyzing sense of surreal dread. The trap had been sprung. The metamorphosis? The transformation began methodically, like a well-rehearsed surgical procedure. Lena, Chloe, and the third girl, Maya, moved around me with a focused intensity that was both terrifying and strangely calming. My own will seemed to evaporate under their confident hands. "Okay, shirt and jeans off," Lena commanded, her tone all business. I hesitated, my hands frozen at my sides. Undressing in front of 3 women was not something I had ever planned on doing. My cheeks burned with a heat that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. "Oh, don't be shy," Chloe said with a kind smile. "We're all artists here. The human body is just a canvas." Somehow, that made it worse. I felt like a block of marble about to be carved into something I wouldn't recognize. Reluctantly, I pulled my t-shirt over my head and kicked off my sneakers, then unzipped my jeans. I stood there in my boxers and socks, feeling utterly exposed and foolish. The first item they handed me was a piece of lingerie that looked like a complicated feat of engineering. It was a black, silky thing with straps and padding. "This is a shaper bodysuit," Maya explained softly. "It'll smooth everything out and give us a better base." Stepping into it was the first shock. The material was cool and slick against my skin. Pulling it up my legs, over my hips, was an exercise in awkward contortion. As I wrangled it over my torso, it compressed me in ways I'd never experienced. It felt like a second skin, one that was trying to gently remold my entire frame. Next came the chest. This was the part I dreaded the most. Chloe came forward holding 2 silicone forms, shaped like teardrops. They were soft and had a surprising weight to them. "Breast forms," she said simply. "Just slip them into the pockets in the bodysuit's bra." My hands were shaking as I took them. The silicone was cool and yielding to the touch, with my back turned, feeling their eyes on me. I clumsily worked them into place. The sensation was profoundly bizarre. A weight settled onto my chest, a gentle pressure that was completely alien. I glanced down. 2 soft mounds now rose from my chest, looking disturbingly realistic under the tight fabric of the bodysuit. A wave of vertigo washed over me. "Perfect," Lena said, circling me like a predator. "Now for the main event." She held up a black corset. It was a serious piece of equipment, with steel boning and long laces down the back. "Take a deep breath," she instructed as she wrapped it around my midsection. I did, and she pulled. The world went tight. The corset squeezed my waist, pushing the air from my lungs and forcing my posture upright. It lifted the padded chest, making it seem even more prominent. I could feel my own heartbeat, a frantic, trapped bird, against the unyielding structure. "How do you feel?" Maya asked, a hint of concern in her voice. "I can't breathe," I wheezed. "You'll get used to it," Lena said dismissively. "Beauty is pain." Then came the stockings. They were sheer black, so fine they felt like smoke in my hands. The sensation of the delicate nylon sliding up my leg, over the light dusting of hair, sent a strange, electric tingle up my spine. It was a completely foreign texture, a feeling of impossible softness and vulnerability. They clipped them to garters attached to the bottom of the corset, the little snaps cold against my skin. Finally, the dress. It was a simple black bodycon dress, but when Lena held it up, it looked like a tiny scrap of fabric. "There's no way that's gonna fit," I croaked. "It stretches," she said, and proceeded to guide the dress over my head. The fabric slid down my newly shaped body, clinging to every curve that hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. It hugged the padded chest, nipped in at the corseted waist, and stretched taut over my hips and rear. I stood rigid. Every muscle in my body tensed. The dress felt less like clothing and more like a declaration. The final touches were a blur. They sat me in a chair in front of a brightly lit mirror. The wig was first. It was heavy. A curtain of dark, wavy hair fell around my shoulders, tickling my neck and cheeks. The scent of the synthetic hair was sweet and strange. Then came the makeup. I closed my eyes, feeling the soft brush of powders, the cool, wet line of the eyeliner being drawn across my lids, the waxy glide of lipstick. It was an invasion of my personal space that left me feeling completely powerless. Throughout the process, a war raged inside me. Part of me was screaming, horrified, ashamed. This was wrong, a violation of who I was. I was being forcibly turned into a parody, a joke, but another, much quieter part of me was fascinated. I was a design student, after all. I understood form and silhouette and texture, and a morbid, artistic curiosity was taking root in the fertile ground of my panic. What was the end result going to be? What would this creation look like? "Okay," Lena said, her voice soft now. "Open your eyes." I took a shaky breath. the corset making it a shallow, unsatisfying gasp. I slowly lifted my eyelids, and that's when I saw her, the girl in the mirror, Eva. The shock was a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me all over again. It was my face, but it wasn't. The structure was mine, but the message it sent was completely different. The makeup hadn't just covered my skin, it had rewritten my features. Where there was Evan, a quiet, unassuming guy, there was now Eva, a striking, mysterious woman with eyes that seemed to hold a secret. My trembling hand rose to my lips. She did the same. We were connected, this stranger and I, and as the initial wave of horror began to recede, it was replaced by a terrifying, thrilling spark of something else, something I couldn't name. "Wow," Chloe whispered from behind me. It worked. It really worked. "We'll call you Ava," Lena said, her voice full of triumph. "For the evening, you are Eva." And as I stared into Eva's eyes, I felt a terrifying surrender. For the evening? Maybe I was. Eva takes a step. "All right, Eva, time for your debut," Lena announced, clapping her hands together. "We need to see how the dress moves under the stage lights. Adrian is waiting." Adrian. The name barely registered over the roaring in my ears. All I could focus on was the next impossible task they were presenting me with walking. Maya knelt and produced a pair of black high heels. They weren't stilettos. Thank God. But they had a solid, thick heel that was at least 3 inches high. They looked elegant, sculptural, and utterly terrifying. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, staring at them as if they were venomous snakes. "You can't wear a dress like that with sneakers," Chloe said, giggling. "Just think of it as a balancing exercise. Heel, then toe. Small steps." Getting my feet into them was the first challenge. My feet, used to the comfortable spread of athletic shoes, felt crammed and distorted. The arch of my foot was forced into a steep, unnatural curve. When I finally stood up, my entire world tilted. I wobbled precariously, my arms flailing for balance. The floor seemed miles away. "Easy does it," Maya said, offering me her arm for support. I leaned on her gratefully, my ankles screaming in protest. Every muscle in my legs was suddenly engaged in a desperate attempt to keep me upright. The weight distribution of my body felt completely wrong. The heels pitched me forward, while the corset held my upper body ramrod straight. The padded chest felt like a counterbalance I hadn't yet learned to operate. Walking wasn't an unconscious act anymore. It was a complex series of calculations, and I was failing the math. Lena pulled back the curtain of the dressing room. Showtime. The main studio space seemed vast and intimidating. The primary lights were off, but the stage area was bathed in a bright, warm glow. Standing near the lights, fiddling with a camera, was a guy I hadn't noticed before. He was tall, with dark, slightly curly hair and a focused expression. He wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, but he carried himself with an air of quiet confidence. This, I presumed, was Adrian? Maya gave me a gentle nudge forward. "You can do it." I took my first solo step. My ankle immediately tried to roll, and I let out a small, undignified squeak. I caught myself, my arms windmilling. The rustle of the stockings against each other was a whispery, alien sound. The cling of the dress was a constant reminder of the body I was currently inhabiting. I felt the slight jiggle of the silicone forms on my chest, and a fresh wave of mortification washed over me. What if one of them fell out? The thought was so horrifying it almost made me forget about the imminent danger of face planting on the concrete floor. I forced myself to take another step, then another, concentrating with every ounce of my being. Heel, toe, small step. I was a toddler learning to walk all over again. The movement was stiff, jerky, and utterly lacking in grace. I was acutely aware of the pressure of the dress on my hips and thighs, a constant, binding sensation. The cool air of the studio felt strange against my legs, a ghost of a touch through the sheer nylon. By the time I reached the edge of the lighted area, I was breathing heavily, or as heavily as the corset would allow, and my forehead was dotted with sweat, which I prayed wouldn't ruin the masterpiece the girls had painted on my face. Adrian looked up from his camera, and his eyes landed on me. He hadn't been told. I realized with a fresh jolt of panic. He didn't know the truth. To him. I wasn't Evan Miller in a dress. I was just a girl. The model. His professional focus softened for a moment. He took a half step forward, his eyes doing a quick, appreciative scan from the heels up to the wig. I felt myself flush from my neck to the roots of my artificial hair. I was being looked at in a way I had never been looked at before. It wasn't the way guys look at each other, a sizing up or a casual acknowledgement. This was different. It was an assessment of form, of femininity. And under his gaze, I felt more naked than I had in my underwear. He moved closer, into my personal space. He smelled faintly of coffee and something clean, like soap. He was taller than me, even in the heels, and I had to tilt my head back slightly to look at him. "Hey," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. He gestured toward the center of the lights. "Just stand right there for me. Let's see what we're working with." I shuffled awkwardly into the designated spot, feeling like a pinned butterfly in a display case. The lights were hot on my skin. I wrapped my arms around myself, a defensive posture that probably looked ridiculous. "Relax your shoulders," he said gently. He made a small motion with his hand. "Let your arms hang naturally." I tried, but my body felt like it belonged to someone else. My arms felt like useless appendages. He lowered his camera and walked over to me. My heart started doing a staccato rhythm against the steel bones of the corset. He stopped just in front of me, so close I could see the flecks of brown in his dark eyes. He didn't touch me, but he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping lower. "Try turning just a little to your right. Yeah, like that, and shift your weight onto your back foot." I followed his instructions, my movements clumsy. As I shifted my weight, my hip jutted out slightly, an accidental feminine pose. The fabric of the dress pulled taut across my thigh. Adrian's eyes followed the line of the dress, and a small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He looked back up at my face. "That pose really suits you," he said, his voice quiet, almost intimate. "You stand beautifully." The words hit me like a physical force. You stand beautifully. Him, a handsome, confident guy who had no idea. He wasn't complimenting Evan, the awkward design student. He was complimenting Eva, the girl in the black dress. He was validating the illusion. And the illusion was me. A deep, unfamiliar heat bloomed in my chest and spread through my entire body. I was blushing. I knew I was. A furious, uncontrollable blush that I prayed the makeup would hide. I forgot how to breathe. I forgot how to think. All I could feel was the constriction of the corset, the wobble of the heels, and the dizzying, terrifying thrill of his approval. It wasn't just embarrassment. It wasn't just fear of being discovered. It was something else, a strange and powerful fluttering in my stomach. It was the shocking realization that being seen as a woman, being treated as a woman by this complete stranger, felt good. It was a dizzying, confusing, and utterly electrifying sensation that short-circuited my brain and left me standing there, speechless. Under the hot lights, Eva had taken her first step, and she had stumbled directly into a feeling Evan had never known existed. When Eva is more than a role. The initial test shots of the black dress were an exercise in controlled awkwardness. Under Adrian's patient guidance, I learned how to shift my weight without toppling over, how to angle my body to the camera, and how to hold a pose that felt profoundly unnatural, but apparently looked good through his lens. The entire time, my mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, the constant, low-grade terror of being found out, and the surprising, intoxicating pull of playing the part of Eva. Once Adrian had what he needed, Lena declared the first test a success. "See, I told you she was a natural," Lena said, Beaming at me, I was still standing awkwardly on the stage, not daring to move too much. "She's a little stiff, but she has a great presence," Adrian commented, reviewing the images on his camera's small screen. "The dress looks fantastic on her." Hearing him refer to me as she and her so casually sent a fresh jolt through me every single time. It was like a secret password that unlocked a part of my brain I never knew was there. "This is just the beginning," Lena announced with a flourish. "The black dress is our baseline. Now, for the rest of the collection." My heart sank. The rest, I thought this was it. Lena waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be silly. We can't let a perfect model go to waste. We have to see how the other key pieces look. It's for the art. Remember." Before I could protest, Chloe and Maya were descending upon me again, guiding me back to the dressing room. This time, the process felt slightly less alien. I knew what to expect, but the new outfits brought new waves of sensory overload. First, they put me in a princess-style ball gown. It had a fitted, sparkling bodice and a massive layered tulle skirt. The sheer volume of it was overwhelming. I felt like I was drowning in fabric. The weight of the skirt pulled on the corseted waist, a constant, heavy pressure. When I walked, the layers of tulle whispered and rustled around my legs, a sound so intensely feminine it made my teeth ache. I felt ridiculous, like a child playing dress-up. But when I saw my reflection, I was stunned. The dress was so grand, so undeniably female, that it completely erased any trace of Evan. After that came a sleek evening gown made of deep blue velvet. The fabric was plush and soft, absorbing the light. It had long sleeves and a high neckline, but it was cut on the bias, clinging to my manufactured curves in a way that felt both elegant and incredibly revealing. I felt older, more sophisticated. I found myself instinctively holding my head a little higher. But the one that truly shattered my remaining defenses was the red satin dress. It was a slip dress, a simple column of fabric the color of dark wine. But simple didn't mean modest. It was held up by two spaghetti-thin straps, leaving my shoulders and collarbones completely bare. The fabric itself was the definition of sensory overload. It was cool and impossibly smooth, like liquid silk pouring over my skin. As Chloe helped me into it, the satin glided over the bodysuit and stockings, a frictionless caressing sensation that made the hairs on my arms stand up. And then there was the slit. It started high on my left thigh, running all the way up to the upper third of my leg. When I stood still, it was a subtle, dark line, but with the slightest movement, the fabric would part, revealing a long expanse of my leg, sheathed in the sheer black nylon of the stocking. I stood frozen in front of the mirror, staring at the flash of my own leg. It felt scandalous, obscene. It was a feature designed purely to draw the eye, to hint at what lay beneath. It was so overtly, intentionally feminine that it made me feel dizzy. "Now that," Lena breathed, coming up behind me, "is a showstopper." She reached down and adjusted how the satin fell over my hip. "Wow, Evan, Eva, you have amazing legs. The heels really make them look a mile long." Her compliment, combined with the shocking image in the mirror and the slinky feel of the satin against my skin, was doing strange things to my insides. The initial shame and resistance were still there, but they were being crowded out by a rising tide of something else, a flicker of pride, a spark of confidence. I turned my leg slightly, watching the slit fall open and then whisper shut again. It was mesmerizing. When I walked back out onto the stage, the change in my demeanor was palpable, even to me. I was still nervous, but the red dress demanded a different kind of energy. I couldn't shuffle or stumble in a dress like this. It required a certain slowness, a deliberate grace. I found myself taking longer, more measured steps, my hips swaying slightly with the motion, a natural consequence of the heels and the narrow cut of the dress. Eva was starting to feel less like a character I was forced to play and more like a skin I was starting to inhabit. Adrian looked up as I approached. and his eyes widened slightly. He said nothing for a moment, simply taking in the vision in red. "Okay," he said, his voice a little rougher than before. "Let's get this shot." He directed me for a while, but he seemed more hands-on this time. He was trying to get a shot of the dress in motion, the way the satin caught the light. "I need you to walk towards me, then turn as you pass," he instructed. I tried, but my turn was clumsy. "Hold on," he said, putting his camera down. He stepped onto the small stage with me. "Let me show you." He stood beside me, his presence warm and solid. "When you turn, lead with your shoulder and let your hips follow. Like this." He demonstrated a smooth, fluid pivot. I tried to copy him, but it still felt awkward. "Here," he said. Moving behind me, my back went rigid. He placed a hand gently on my shoulder and another on my hip, just above where the slit began. His touch was light, professional, but it sent a bolt of lightning straight through me. I could feel the warmth of his palm through the thin satin, a searing point of contact that made my stomach do a slow, terrifying flip. "Just relax into it," he murmured, his voice close to my ear. "When I say turn, just let your body follow my hands." I gave a jerky nod. Unable to speak, my entire universe had shrunk to the 2 points where he was touching me. "Okay, turn." He guided me through the motion, my body, responding to his touch more than my own brain, moved with a surprising fluidity. The dress swirled around my legs, the slit flying open dramatically. "Perfect hold," that he said, letting go and quickly stepping back to grab his camera. I was left standing there, heart pounding, the ghost of his touch still burning on my skin. I held the pose, my body trembling slightly. I didn't know if I was shaking from the effort of balancing on the 10-centimeter heels Lena had insisted on for this dress, or if it was because of him. After a few more shots, he motioned for me to relax. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "That was great," he said, a genuine smile on his face. He walked back over to me. "You're really getting the hang of this." His praise felt like a warm drink on a cold day. It was addictive. "Before you change," he said, his expression turning thoughtful, "I have an idea. For an internal poster for the club showcase, just a simple headshot, but with this look, it could be really striking." He moved closer again, his photographer's eye taking over. He reached out, his movements slow, as if not to spook a timid animal. He gently cupped my chin with his thumb and forefinger, tilting my head up slightly. "Don't look down," he said, his voice a low murmur. "You're more beautiful when you hold your head high." My breath hitched. His thumb was resting just below my bottom lip, a whisper of pressure. His eyes were focused on my face, but they weren't just looking at the makeup or the wig. It felt like he was looking deeper, searching for something, for a dizzying, insane moment. I felt seen, not Evan, the guy in a dress, but Eva, beautiful, confident Eva. That single, fleeting moment, the feel of his touch, the intensity in his eyes, the red satin cool against my skin was a point of no return. The line between Evan and Eva, between performance and reality, blurred into non-existence, and in that haze, I found myself wanting to stay Eva for just a little while longer. Eva and the Midnight Mirror. The whirlwind session finally came to an end. The lights were powered down. The other club members started packing up their gear, and the magical, charged atmosphere began to dissipate, leaving behind the mundane reality of a basement studio late on a Tuesday night. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache. My feet were throbbing. My ribs felt bruised from the corset, and a dull headache was starting to bloom behind my eyes from the tension of it all. All I wanted was to peel off this suffocating second skin and become myself again. I was in the dressing room, my hands at the zipper of the red dress, when Lena poked her head through the curtain. "You were incredible tonight, Eva," she said, her smile genuine and warm. "Seriously, you saved me." "Don't call me that," I mumbled, my voice rough. The spell was broken, and the embarrassment was flooding back in, cold and sharp. It's over. I just want to change. Right, of course. She hesitated for a moment, biting her lip. Hey, so, about that red dress? I paused, my hand still on the zipper. What about it? We're not actually going to use it in the final show. It was a prototype, and the designer decided to go in a different direction. It's just going to sit in a storage box. She looked at me, her eyes gleaming with that familiar, mischievous light. Do you want to keep it? We have no use for it. 1,000 rational thoughts screamed at me to say no. No, absolutely not. Why would I want that? I'm a man. I'm never doing this again. Burn it. It was a ridiculous, insane proposition. But I didn't say no. A strange, traitorous silence hung in the air. I thought of the way the satin felt against my skin. I thought of the flash of my own leg in the mirror. I thought of the look in Adrian's eyes when he saw me in it. The memories were vivid, sensory, and powerful. I don't know, I stammered, the words feeling thick and clumsy in my mouth. Lena's grin widened. She knew she had me. Just take it. Think of it as a souvenir from your short-lived but brilliant modeling career. She winked. Or, just in case. She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed a garment bag, carefully placed the red dress inside, along with the sheer black stockings, and handed it to me. My lips are sealed. She whispered. I took the bag. My hand felt numb. It felt heavier than it should, weighted with a significance I didn't want to examine too closely. I changed back into my own clothes, my soft, worn jeans and my loose, comfortable hoodie. They felt like a costume. The familiar fabric felt strange against my skin, which was still buzzing with the memory of silk and nylon. My own body felt wrong, too broad in the shoulders, too thick in the waist. When I walked, my feet, now freed from the heels, felt flat and clumsy on the floor. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I mumbled my goodbyes and practically fled the studio. The garment bag clutched in my hand like a dirty secret. The walk back to my dorm was a blur. The cool night air felt good on my face, but it couldn't clear the fog in my head. I got back to my room, locked the door, and leaned against it, my heart still beating too fast. The room was exactly as I'd left it, laptop open, clothes tossed on a chair, a stack of design books on my desk. It was my space, Evan's space, but it felt like it belonged to someone else. I dropped the garment bag on my bed. I told myself to put it in the back of my closet and forget about it. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But I couldn't. Hours passed. I tried to work on my project, but the words and images on the screen were just a meaningless jumble. I tried to watch a movie, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to the studio, to the lights, to the feel of the clothes, to Adrian's voice. Sometime after midnight, when the rest of the dorm was quiet and the only sound was the hum of my mini fridge, I found myself standing in front of the full-length mirror on the back of my closet door. The garment bag was still on the bed, a dark slash against my gray comforter. With a sense of grim inevitability, I unzipped it. The red satin dress slithered out, pooling on my bed like a puddle of blood in the dim light. The stockings were tucked inside. My hands moved on their own accord, my mind a spectator to their actions. I stripped off my clothes, my movements slow, deliberate. And then, for the second time in one night, I began the transformation. This time, it was different. There were no chattering girls, no confident hands guiding me. It was just me and my reflection. I didn't have the bodysuit or the corset, so the silhouette wouldn't be the same. But I slipped on the stockings, the cool nylon whispering up my legs in the silent room. The sensation was just as electric as the first time. Then I lifted the dress over my head. The satin was cold against my bare skin. It settled over my frame, clinging in some places, hanging loosely in others, without the corset. My waist was thicker, without the breast forms. My chest was flat. I turned to the mirror, my heart hammering. The image that looked back was a strange hybrid. It was unmistakably me, Evan, with my masculine frame, but I was draped in this impossibly feminine garment. My shoulders seemed too wide for the delicate straps. My chest was flat beneath the soft drape of the cowl neckline. But then my eyes started to pick out the details. The way the red brought out the warm tones in my skin. The way the light from my desk lamp caught the sheen of the fabric. I still had traces of makeup on, a faint smudge of eyeliner, a hint of foundation that hadn't come off. It was just enough to soften my features, to blur the lines. I touched my face, my fingers tracing the line of my jaw. I ran a hand down my side, feeling the impossible smoothness of the satin. I took a hesitant step, and the slit fell open, revealing my stocking-clad leg. And then it happened. A deep, shuddering breath escaped me, staring at this strange boy girl in the mirror, this fusion of Evan and Eva. I didn't feel the same panic or shame as before. In the privacy of my own room, with no one to watch or judge, something else was taking its place. A sense of rightness. It was a quiet, terrifying, and profound realization. Looking at the reflection, I saw a flicker of a person I had never met but somehow recognized on a primal level. The contrast between my male body and the female attire didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt interesting. It felt honest, in a way that my everyday persona of Evan the design student sometimes didn't. I touched my lips, still faintly colored. I thought about Adrian's words, "You're more beautiful when you hold your head high." Standing there, bathed in the soft glow of my lamp, I lifted my chin. I met my own gaze in the mirror, and for the first time, I asked myself the question that had been hovering at the edge of my consciousness all night, the question I had been too afraid to form into words. Why does this feel so right? The question hung in the silent room, unanswered, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my life had just been irrevocably split into two parts, everything before the red dress, and everything that would come after. A text for Eva. The next day passed in a haze of unreality. I went to my classes, nodded along to lectures about color theory and user interface design, but my mind was elsewhere. It was back in my room, replaying the moment in front of the mirror. It was in the art studio, feeling the ghost of Adrian's hand on my hip. I felt disconnected from my own life, like I was watching a movie starring someone who just happened to look like me. The garment bag containing the red dress was hidden deep in my closet, but it felt like a radioactive object, emitting a silent energy that permeated the entire room. I was jumpy, irritable, and profoundly confused. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw a notification from the art club's group chat. Lena had uploaded the photos from the previous night's test shoot. My stomach twisted into a knot. With a trembling finger, I opened the chat. There was a link to a cloud drive. I clicked on it. Folders appeared, neatly labeled Black Bodycon, Blue Velvet, Princess Gown, and then, at the bottom, a folder that made my breath catch, Eva Models Selects. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I shouldn't look. It was a terrible idea, but I couldn't stop myself. I opened the folder. The images were stunning. Adrian was more than just a good photographer. He was an artist. He had captured the textures of the fabrics, the play of light and shadow, and the mood of each outfit perfectly. And in the center of every frame was Eva. She looked like a professional model, poised, confident, and alluringly mysterious. The makeup and wig did a lot of the work, but there was something in the eyes, in the posture, that felt real. Adrian had captured the fragile, emerging confidence of Eva, a confidence that Evan certainly didn't possess. I stared at the photo of Eva in the red dress, the one where I was holding the pose after he had touched me. There was a vulnerability in my expression, a soft blush on my cheeks, a look of startled discovery in my eyes. It was the most honest picture of me I had ever seen. I was so absorbed in the photos that I almost missed the second buzz from my phone. It was a direct message. My blood ran cold when I saw the sender's name Adrian. My first thought was that he had figured it out. He knew. He was messaging me, Evan, to call me out, to laugh at me. I braced myself for the humiliation, but when I opened the message, the words on the screen made my world tilt on its axis. The message wasn't addressed to Evan. He had gotten the contact info from the club roster, but the message itself was clearly not for me. It read, "Hey Ava, it's Adrian, the photographer from last night. The pictures of you are incredible. You're a real natural. I was wondering if you might be free on Saturday. I'd love to do a private shoot. Just for your own personal portfolio. No charge, of course. I think we could create some amazing work together." I read the message once, then twice, then a third time. My brain struggled to process it. He wasn't texting Evan. He was texting Eva. He thought Eva was a real person, a girl he had met, a model he wanted to work with again. Panic, pure and undiluted, seized me. This was a nightmare, a terrible, hilarious, cringe-worthy mistake. I should correct him immediately. "Sorry, dude, you've got the wrong idea. It was just a joke. I'm a guy. That's what I should type." That was the only sane, rational thing to do. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I typed out, "Sorry, there's been a misunderstanding." But I stopped. I stared at his message again. "The pictures of you are incredible. You're a real natural." He wasn't making fun of me. He was admiring me. Or, at least, he was admiring her, Eva. And a dangerous, reckless thought pushed its way through the panic. What if I didn't correct him? What if I said yes? The idea was insane. It was deceptive. It was impossible. How could I possibly pull it off again? In broad daylight, without Lena and her team of experts. But the memory of how I felt as Eva, confident, beautiful, seen, was a powerful lure. The feeling was like a drug, and I was already craving another hit. The life of Evan Miller, with his deadlines and his social anxiety, felt so gray and mundane in comparison. The world of Eva, even if it was just for a few hours in a photo studio, was vibrant and full of terrifying, thrilling possibilities. My thumbs moved again, deleting the apology. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and I knew I should step back. Instead, I jumped. I typed, "That sounds great. I'd love to. I'm free on Saturday." And then before I could lose my nerve, I hit send. The moment the message delivered, a wave of "What have I done for ye?" washed over me. I threw my phone onto my bed as if it were on fire. I had just agreed to a date. No, not a date. A photo shoot. But it felt like a date. I had agreed to show up and be a person who didn't exist. The next few days were a blur of frantic, secret preparation. I knew I couldn't replicate the masterpiece Lena's team had created, but I had to try. I spent hours watching makeup tutorials online, my browser history becoming a strange catalog of how to feminize your face, beginner's eyeliner tips, and how to apply foundation for a smooth finish. Using my student loan money that was supposed to be for art supplies, I made a clandestine trip to a huge pharmacy on the other side of town. I bought foundation, concealer, powder, a cheap eyeliner pencil, mascara, and a neutral-toned lipstick. I bought makeup remover wipes and a wig stand. Each purchase felt like a small crime, my heart thudding as I placed the items on the counter, praying the cashier wouldn't look at me too closely. The biggest challenge was the body. I didn't have the shaper or the corset or the breast forms. After another deep dive online, I ordered a padded bodysuit that promised realistic curves and a pair of hip pads from an obscure website. paying extra for rush shipping to a locker at a nearby convenience store so the package wouldn't arrive at my dorm. The days leading up to Saturday were a frantic rehearsal. Every night, after my roommate was asleep, I would lock myself in the bathroom and practice. My first attempt at eyeliner was a disaster. I looked like a raccoon. I struggled to get the foundation to blend, leaving streaks on my jawline. My hand shook as I tried to apply the lipstick. It was a slow, frustrating process. I practiced walking in the heels, doing laps around my small room, wobbling and catching myself, trying to find a rhythm. I put on the new bodysuit and hip pads under my own clothes, just to get used to the feel of them, the way they changed how I moved, how I sat. Finally, Saturday arrived. It was a bright, crisp autumn day. I had told Adrian I would meet him at his studio at 2 p.m. My morning was a ritual of transformation, more intense and personal than the first time. I showered and shaved meticulously, not just my face, but my chest and legs too. The sensation of the razor on my legs was strange, but the resulting smoothness was a revelation. I put on the padded bodysuit and hip pads, then the stockings. I chose a simple, elegant outfit of black, high-waisted skirt, a soft cream-colored sweater, and a pair of simple black pumps I'd bought, with a slightly lower heel than the first pair. I sat at my desk, the cheap makeup spread out before me. I took a deep breath and began. It wasn't perfect. My eyeliner was a little uneven, my contouring a bit clumsy, but it was 1,000 times better than my first attempt. It was Eva, but a softer, more subdued version. The last step was the wig. I had brushed it carefully and placed it on the stand. I lifted it and settled it onto my head, tucking my own short hair underneath. The cascade of long, dark brown waves fell around my shoulders. It was the final piece of the puzzle. I stood up and looked in the mirror. The person looking back was nervous, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anticipation, but she was Ava. It was me. I had done it. I had created her, all by myself. I took a deep, steadying breath, the air catching slightly on the lump of anxiety in my throat. I looked my reflection in the eye. "Hello, Ava," I whispered, and her lips moved with mine. "Let's go meet him." A private session and a startling proposition. Adrian's studio was in a converted warehouse district on the edge of town, an area filled with art galleries and coffee shops. The building was old brick and timber, and his space was on the top floor, with huge industrial windows that flooded the room with beautiful, diffused afternoon light. It was a photographer's dream. My heart was a frantic hummingbird in my chest as I rode the rickety freight elevator up. My palms were sweating. What was I thinking? This was insane. He would take one look at me up close, in the clear light of day, and he would know. The illusion would shatter, and I would be left standing there, a freak in a wig and a padded bodysuit. The elevator doors opened directly into the studio, and there he was, standing by one of the massive windows, looking out. He turned as he heard the doors open, and a warm smile spread across his face. "Eva, you made it. Wow." He looked me up and down, not in a leering way, but with the same appreciative artistic eye as before. My carefully constructed outfit seemed to meet his approval. "You look amazing," he said, walking toward me. "That sweater is perfect on you." Thank you," I managed to squeak out, my voice coming out an octave higher than usual, a nervous tick that actually worked in my favor. "Come on in," he said, gesturing to the main space. "Can I get you some water coffee?" "Water would be great. Thanks." The studio was even better up close. It was spacious and clean, with white walls, polished wooden floors, and professional equipment set up neatly to one side. A comfortable-looking sofa and a couple of armchairs sat in a corner, creating a small lounge area. It felt professional, but also personal and inviting. He handed me a glass of cold water, and our fingers brushed for a fleeting second. An electric jolt shot up my arm. I nearly dropped the glass. His touch was brief, accidental, but it felt incredibly charged. "So," he said, leaning against a workbench, "I was thinking we could start with some simple portraits, just to get you warmed up. We can just use the natural light from the windows. It's beautiful today." "Okay," I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. The session began much like the first one, with Adrian giving me simple directions. "Turn your head to the left, a little more. Perfect. Now drop your chin just a bit." But this environment was entirely different. It wasn't a chaotic club rehearsal with Lena and the others buzzing around. It was just the two of us. The silence in the room was broken only by the soft click of his camera shutter and the sound of his voice. The intimacy of the situation was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As I started to relax into the process, he became more hands-on. "Here, let me fix this," he said, stepping forward. He gently brushed a stray strand of hair from the wig off my cheek. His fingers were warm against my skin. I flinched, almost imperceptibly. "Sorry," he said, pulling his hand back. "Did I startle you?" "No, it's fine," I said quickly. "Just not used to this." He smiled, a kind, understanding smile. "You're doing great. You have a very expressive face. The camera loves you." We moved to a different setup. With a plain gray backdrop, he asked me to sit on a simple wooden stool. "I want to try something a little more dynamic," he said, studying me through the lens. "Cross your legs for me, good. Now, lean forward slightly and place your hands on your knees." I did as he asked, the movement feeling surprisingly natural in the skirt. "That's good, but your posture is a little stiff. Here." He put his camera down again and came over to me. He knelt in front of me, bringing our faces to the same level. My breath caught in my throat. He was so close. I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the concentration in his eyes. "I want you to arch your back. Just a little," he said, his voice low. He placed a hand on my shoulder to steady me, and his other hand went to the small of my back. "Like this. See, it creates a much more elegant line." His hand on my back was a point of pure fire. It was firm, guiding, and sent a chaotic shiver running through my entire body. I was so aware of him, of his proximity, of the fact that only a thin layer of cream-colored wool separated his hand from the padded bodysuit that was creating this lie. I held the pose, my body trembling under his touch. He looked at my face, and a small smile played on his lips. "You blush so easily," he said, his voice a soft murmur. "It's cute." My blush, which was already a roaring fire, intensified to a supernova. Cute. He called me cute. A guy had never called me cute before. The word, so simple, so innocent, landed with the force of a bomb in my confused mind. It was a word for a girl, and he had aimed it right at me. He moved back to his camera and took a series of shots. I remained in a daze, the feeling of his hand still imprinted on my back. We worked for nearly 2 hours. He was a consummate professional, always patient, always encouraging, and with every click of the shutter, with every word of praise, I felt the character of Ava solidifying. She wasn't just a costume anymore. She was a feeling, a state of being, and I was sinking into her, drowning in her, and I found that I didn't want to be saved. As the afternoon light began to fade, he finally lowered his camera for the last time. "I think we have it," he said, a look of deep satisfaction on his face. "These are going to be spectacular. Eva." "Thank you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I felt emotionally and physically drained, but also strangely energized. I stood up from the stool, my legs a little shaky. "Thank you for doing this," I said, trying to sound like a normal girl wrapping up a photo shoot. "It was really fun." "The pleasure was all mine," he said, his eyes holding mine. The professional photographer was gone, and in his place was just Adrian, the man. The mood in the room shifted, becoming something softer, more personal. He walked with me toward the elevator. The silence between us was thick with unspoken things. "Eva," he said, just as I reached for the elevator button. I turned to face him. He looked hesitant, almost nervous, a stark contrast to the confident artist he'd been all afternoon. "I know we just met, and this might be a little forward," he began, running a hand through his dark hair. "But I had a really great time with you today. Not just the photography. You—" My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. "I'd like to know you," he continued, his gaze direct and sincere. "I'd like to know who you are when the camera isn't on you." The question hung in the air between us, a terrifying, beautiful invitation. He wanted to know me, the real me, but the me he was seeing wasn't real. It was a construct of makeup, padding, and lies. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the warm haze of the afternoon. This was it, the end of the line. I had to tell him. I had to confess everything and watch the kindness in his eyes curdle into confusion, disgust, or worse, pity. But as I opened my mouth to speak, to shatter the illusion, I looked at his face, at the genuine interest, the hint of vulnerability. He wasn't asking to see a model. He was asking to see a person, and the part of me that was Eva, the part that had blossomed under his attention, that had felt beautiful and confident for the first time in my life, screamed in protest. She didn't want to die. Not yet. Instead of confessing, a different set of words tumbled out of my mouth, driven by a desperate, reckless act of self-preservation for the girl in the mirror. "This weekend?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm free this weekend." His face broke into a relieved, brilliant smile. "Great." He said, "How about coffee Saturday?" I nodded, unable to speak. I had just taken a lie and built a second story on top of it. The foundation was already cracking, but I was too high up to care about the fall. Not yet. Two people in one body. The week that followed was a masterclass in psychological whiplash. I was living two completely separate, conflicting lives, and the strain of it was starting to fray the edges of my sanity. My body became a borderland, a contested territory between two increasingly demanding identities. By day, I was Evan Miller. I shuffled to my 9 a.m. lectures in a gray hoodie and faded jeans. My hair was a mess. I hunched over my laptop in the library, the familiar weight of deadlines and student loan debt pressing down on me. I was quiet, practically invisible. My interactions were minimal, functional. I was a ghost haunting the campus, my mind a million miles away. My male clothes started to feel like a costume, a drab, ill-fitting uniform for a role I no longer wanted to play. The loose fabric felt abrasive, the solid weight of my sneakers clumsy and grounding in a way I was beginning to resent. But at night, in the privacy of my locked dorm room, I was Eva. My world transformed. I would pull out the hidden boxes of makeup, the carefully folded clothes, the wig on its stand. The nightly ritual became my sanctuary, the process of shaving my legs, of applying the foundation and eyeliner with an increasingly steady hand, of slipping into a soft dress or a skirt. It was a form of meditation. It was a shedding of the skin of Evan, the anxious student, and an embrace of the quiet confidence of Eva. As Eva, I felt a sense of rightness, of peace, that Evan never experienced. I loved the feeling of a skirt swishing around my legs, the gentle click of heels on my floorboards, the sight of my own reflection looking back at me with a soft, feminine grace. I was starting to see Eva not as a disguise, but as a more authentic version of myself, a self that had been buried so deep I never knew she existed. The contrast was jarring, and it bled into every aspect of my life. I found myself looking at women on the street not with attraction, but with a studious, almost academic curiosity. I'd analyze their clothes, their makeup, the way they walked, the way they carried their purses. I was gathering data, learning, preparing. The center of this confusing new universe was Adrian. We texted throughout the week. His messages were casual, friendly, full of questions. "What kind of music are you into?" Seen any good movies lately? How's your week going? Each message was a small, terrifying test. I was building a fictional person from scratch, borrowing bits and pieces from Lena, from characters in movies, from my own secret desires. Eva liked indie folk music. Eva was a fan of old French films. Eva's week was pretty good, just busy with classes. Every lie was a brick in the wall I was building around myself, a wall that was getting higher and more precarious with each passing day. The most intense moments were when he would text, "Can't wait for Saturday." Each time, my heart would leap into my throat, a giddy, terrifying flutter. I was living for the weekend, for the moment I could be Eva again. But I was also consumed by a deep, gnawing guilt. I was deceiving him. This kind, handsome, interesting man who was showing a genuine interest in a person who didn't even exist. He deserved the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to give it to him. The thought of losing this connection, of seeing the light in his eyes go out, was unbearable. The conflict reached a boiling point on Thursday night. I had a particularly grueling day of critiques for my design project. The feedback was harsh, and I left the class feeling small and incompetent. I felt like a failure as Evan. The moment I got back to my room, I locked the door and began the ritual. I needed to wash Evan away. I needed to be Ava. I did the full transformation, the bodysuit, the makeup, the wig. I put on the black skirt and cream sweater from the photo shoot. I stood in front of the mirror, and there she was, Eva, calm, poised, beautiful. She didn't have to worry about typography or branding strategies. She was enough. For a while, it worked. The anxiety receded. I felt a sense of peace settle over me. But as the hours wore on, the illusion began to crack. I was still in my dorm room. My half-finished, heavily criticized project was still sitting on my laptop. I was still Evan. I went into the small, shared bathroom down the hall, making sure it was empty. I stared at my reflection under the harsh fluorescent lights. Eva looked back, but she seemed tired, her smile a little fragile. The guilt was creeping back in. I took out a makeup remover wipe. I pressed it to my eye, and with a single swipe, the eyeliner and mascara came away. One of Eva's large, dramatic eyes was gone, replaced by my own, smaller, unadorned eye. I looked in the mirror at the bizarre, two-faced image, half Eva, half Evan. It was a perfect visual representation of the war raging inside me. I was two people in one body, and I didn't know which one was real anymore. With a growing sense of desperation, I started scrubbing at my face. The foundation came away in patches, revealing my pale, slightly blotchy skin underneath. The lipstick smeared, then vanished. With each wipe, a piece of Eva was erased, and a piece of Evan was forced to reappear. But the more makeup I removed, the more alien my own male face looked to me. The jaw seemed too sharp, the eyebrows too thick, the lips too thin. Without the softening filter of makeup, my face felt harsh, unfamiliar. It felt like the mask, and the painted face of Eva felt like the truth. I ripped the wig off and tossed it onto the counter. My own short hair was flat and damp with sweat. I looked at myself, Evan, in the mirror, and for the first time, I felt a profound sense of loss, a feeling of being erased. It was as if I wasn't wiping away a disguise. I was wiping away myself. I leaned against the cold tile of the bathroom wall, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The conflict wasn't about a choice between being a man or playing a woman anymore. It was about a choice between being the person I was supposed to be and the person I was terrified to admit I might actually be. Adrian's innocent invitation for coffee had become a crucible, forcing a confrontation that was tearing me apart, and Saturday was coming. A choice at the wardrobe. Saturday morning dawned with an air of finality. The sky was a clear, brilliant blue, a beautiful day for either an execution or a coronation. I woke up with a knot of dread and excitement tangled in my stomach. Today was the day. Today. I would have to face Adrian, and in doing so, face myself. I lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had a choice to make, a stark and simple one. I could cancel the date. I could text him, claim I was sick, and then disappear. It would be the cowardly way out, but it would be safe. I could retreat back into the gray, comfortable anonymity of being Evan, and this whole insane, beautiful, terrifying chapter of my life could be chalked up to a strange experiment that went too far. Or I could go. But if I went, who would show up at that coffee shop? Would it be Evan? Could I walk in there, in my jeans and hoodie, and say, "Hi, it's me, the guy from the pictures"? The thought alone made my skin crawl, with a shame so profound it was almost paralyzing. It would be a confession and an ending all in one. He would look at me with confusion, then dawning horror. And that would be it. The connection, the fragile, beautiful thing we had, would be obliterated. The other option was to go as Ava, to put on the clothes, the makeup, the persona, and walk into that cafe as the woman he was expecting. It meant continuing the lie, deepening the deception. It was a path fraught with the peril of discovery at any moment, but it was also the only path that allowed for the possibility of more of this feeling, more of this connection, more of him. I got out of bed and walked to my closet. I opened the door. On one side hung Evan's Life, a row of hoodies, flannel shirts, and jeans. They looked drab, lifeless, like the shed skin of a person I used to be. On the other side, hidden in a garment bag and a series of boxes, was Ava's existence. The red dress, the black skirt, the cream sweater, the soft cardigans I had bought in a fit of optimistic terror. I stood before my closet for what felt like an eternity. It wasn't just a choice of what to wear. It was a choice of who to be. My hand reached out. It hesitated for a moment over a familiar gray hoodie, then moved past it. My fingers closed around the soft fabric of a knee-length floral skirt and a simple, fitted V-neck sweater in a lovely shade of teal. It was an outfit I had bought for Eva, feminine and pretty, but understated. It was perfect for a coffee date. It was a choice. The next 2 hours were a blur of focused activity. The ritual was no longer just about creating a disguise. It was about arming myself for battle. Every step was deliberate, imbued with a sense of purpose. The shower, the shave, the careful application of the bodysuit and pads that created her soft curves. I sat at my desk, which had become Ava's vanity, and began my makeup. My hands were surprisingly steady. I wasn't just covering up Evan anymore. I was bringing Ava to life. I blended the foundation, added a soft blush to my cheeks, and carefully applied a natural-looking lipstick. My eyeliner was still a little shaky, but it was a vast improvement. I was creating her, piece by piece. When I was done, I put on the outfit. The skirt swished around my calves, a gentle, reassuring sound. The sweater was soft against my skin. I slipped my feet into a pair of low, 7-centimeter heels high enough to feel elegant, low enough that I could walk with confidence. Finally, the wig. I settled it on my head, the long brown waves falling around my shoulders. I looked in the mirror. Ava looked back at me. Her eyes were wide with fear. Yes, but there was a flicker of determination in them, too. She was terrified, but she was ready. She had chosen to exist. I grabbed my purse, a simple shoulder bag I'd bought that now contained my wallet, keys, and phone, and took one last deep breath. "You can do this," I whispered to the girl in the mirror. She didn't answer, but her resolve seemed to strengthen. The coffee shop Adrian had chosen was a cozy, sunlit place with big windows looking out onto the street. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs as I walked from the bus stop. Every person who passed me on the sidewalk felt like a judge and jury. Were they staring? Did they know? But no one gave me a second glance. I was just another woman on her way to meet a friend. The anonymity was both a relief and a strange thrill. I saw him through the window before I went in. He was sitting at a small table, nursing a cup of coffee, looking devastatingly handsome in a simple gray sweater. He glanced at his watch, then looked up toward the door, a hopeful expression on his face. This was the final point of no return. I could still turn and run. But then he saw me. His face broke into that same brilliant, heart-stopping smile. He stood up. I couldn't run. Eva wouldn't run. I pushed the door open, the little bell above it chiming my arrival, and walked in. Eva, he said, his voice full of warmth. Hey, I'm so glad you came. Me too, I said, and was surprised to find that it was the truth. The conversation was stilted at first. We were both nervous. We talked about the weather, the coffee, the neighborhood. But slowly, as the caffeine kicked in and the initial terror began to subside, we found a rhythm. He was easy to talk to. He was funny, intelligent, and a great listener. He asked me about my fictional design classes, and I found myself talking with a passion that wasn't entirely feigned, channeling my own experiences as Evan into Eva's narrative. He told me about his family, his passion for photography that started with a cheap film camera his grandfather gave him, his dream of one day traveling the world and taking pictures. I was so engrossed in his stories, in the way his eyes lit up when he talked about something he loved, that for moments at a time, I forgot to be scared. I forgot I was lying. I was just a girl, having coffee with a boy she was starting to like a lot. After about an hour, there was a lull in the conversation. He just looked at me, a soft, thoughtful expression on his face. He reached across the table and tentatively covered my hand with his. His hand was warm and large, and the simple, gentle touch sent a shockwave straight to my heart. Eva, he said, his voice low and serious, I have to be honest. I feel like there's something more to you than you let on. There's a depth, a kind of sadness in your eyes sometimes, but there's also this incredible strength. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly tight. He was seeing through the cracks. He was seeing the conflict. He was seeing Evan, hiding behind Eva's eyes. I don't want to pressure you, he continued, his thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. And maybe it's not my place to ask, but I meant what I said at the studio. No matter who you are, no matter what you're hiding, I want to know the real you. His words were a perfect, devastating combination of kindness and perception. He wasn't accusing me. He was inviting me. He was offering me a safe space to land. He was giving me the out I both craved and dreaded. This was the moment, the ultimate moment of decision. I could pull my hand away, laugh it off, and change the subject, or I could take the leap. I could tell him everything and risk destroying this fragile, beautiful connection. I looked at him, at his sincere, open face. I looked at our hands, joined together on the small table. The image was so simple, so normal, and yet it was the most extraordinary thing that had ever happened to me. Eva had brought me here. She had given me the courage to walk into this coffee shop, to sit across from this wonderful man, to feel his touch. But Eva couldn't answer his question. Only Evan could. I opened my mouth to speak. The truth balanced precariously on the tip of my tongue. A truth that would either set me free or send me crashing back down to earth. A broken mess of lies and dresses. The future of Evan and Eva hung on the next words I would say. A future in question. The air in the coffee shop grew thick, charged with the weight of his question. I want to know the real you. The words echoed in the space between us, a gentle but insistent demand for a truth I wasn't sure I possessed. My entire being was a war zone. The terrified Evan was screaming at me to run, to protect the secret at all costs. But Eva, the woman he had helped create, the person who was feeling his warm hand covering hers, wanted to trust him. She wanted to be known. My lips parted. I was going to tell him. I was going to say the words, "My name is Evan." But as I looked into his dark, patient eyes, a different kind of fear seized me. It wasn't just the fear of rejection. It was the fear of defining myself if I said, I'm Evan. Was I killing Eva for good? Was I dismissing this entire, world-altering experience as a simple lie, and if I tried to explain the nuance, the confusion, the feeling of rightness I felt as Eva, would he even understand? How do you explain to someone that you feel more yourself in a costume than you do in your own skin? The moment stretched, and my silence became an answer in itself. I couldn't do it. Not here. Not now. I wasn't ready. I gave a small, shaky smile, a masterpiece of deflection. That's a very deep question for a first date, I said, my voice softer and more breathless than I intended. I gently squeezed his hand, a gesture of reassurance that was meant as much for myself as for him. I'm complicated, I guess. Isn't everyone? It was a masterful evasion, a verbal sidestep that answered nothing but invited him to back away from the subject gracefully. He held my gaze for a moment longer, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by that familiar kindness. He was letting me off the hook. "You're right," he said, his smile returning. "Too heavy. Let's just stick to favorite colors and whether or not pineapple belongs on pizza." The tension broke. I laughed, a genuine laugh of relief that sounded light and feminine. "Pineapple on pizza is a crime against humanity," I declared. And the conversation flowed again, back into the safe, shallow waters of getting-to-know-you chatter. We stayed for another hour, and the rest of the date was wonderful. We discovered a shared love for old horror movies and a mutual dislike for cilantro. He made me laugh so hard I had to wipe away a tear, careful not to smudge my mascara. When we finally left the coffee shop and walked out into the cool afternoon air, I felt a sense of giddy, intoxicating happiness I had never known. This was real. This feeling was real. Even if the circumstances were not. He walked me to the bus stop, under the guise of keeping me warm. He draped his arm over my shoulders, pulling me close to his side. I leaned into his warmth, my head resting for just a moment against his arm. It felt safe. It felt right. "I had a really, really great time today," Eva, he said as the bus approached. "Me too, Adrian," I said, looking up at him. He hesitated for a second. Then he leaned down and pressed a soft, gentle kiss to my cheek. It was chaste, respectful, but it sent fire through my veins. My whole body tingled from the spot where his lips had touched my skin. "I'll text you," he said, and then he stepped back as I boarded the bus. I found a seat by the window and watched him stand on the sidewalk until the bus turned the corner. I pressed my fingers to my cheek. A goofy, love-struck smile plastered on my face. The date had been a success. I had survived. More than survived. I had thrived. But as the bus rumbled on and the initial euphoria began to fade, the reality of my situation came crashing back down. I had dodged the bullet today, but the gun was still loaded. He wanted to see me again, and again. How long could I keep this up? How long could I live this lie? A lie that was becoming more complex and more emotionally charged every single day. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lena. "Saw the new pics Adrian posted on the club's page. The private portfolio stuff. You look happy. So spill. What's going on with you and the hot photographer?" I stared at the message. Lena was the only other person who knew the whole truth. She was the architect of this whole mess. I typed back a simple, non-committal reply. "He's nice." Her response came back instantly. "Nice, Evan. I saw the way he was looking at you during the first shoot, and the way you were looking at him. Be careful. Okay, are you sure you're just acting anymore?" Her question hit me with the force of a physical blow. Are you sure you're just acting anymore? The answer was a resounding no. This wasn't an act. Not anymore. The feelings were real. The connection with Adrian was real. The confidence I felt as Ava was real. The only thing that wasn't real was my name and my anatomy, and the more time I spent as Ava, the less that seemed to matter. I went to my mirror and looked at my reflection. Eva looked back. Her makeup slightly faded after a long day. her hair a little tousled. There was a soft, happy glow in her eyes, the after effects of a perfect first date. But beneath the glow, I could see the worry. I could see the conflict that Adrian had noticed. I could see Evan. This double life was unsustainable. It was a beautiful, fragile bubble, and eventually, it was going to pop. Adrian's desire to know the real me wouldn't go away. Lena's perceptive questions would keep coming, and my own conscience was screaming louder every day. I was standing at a precipice, looking out over a future that was a complete unknown. The path of Evan was safe, familiar, but it now felt like a life half lived. The path of Ava was thrilling, authentic in a way I couldn't explain, but it was built on a foundation of deceit that could crumble at any moment. I thought about the future, about a second date with Adrian, a third, a first real kiss. The idea was both a dream and a nightmare. How could I ever let him get closer, knowing that the closer he got, the more devastating the truth would be when it finally came out? A final, terrifying question echoed in the silent room, a question posed not by Lena or Adrian, but by the deepest part of my own confused soul. It was the question that would define everything to come. If you're not the person you thought you were, do you have the courage to become the person you want to be? I stared into Eva's eyes in the mirror, searching for an answer, but she had none to give. We would have to find it together.